Hamas terrorists fired anti-tank missiles at an engineering vehicle in Rafah inside the Gaza Strip late on Sunday evening, resulting in 2 fatalities amongst the IDF soldiers positioned at that location and leading to a large retaliatory strike against Hamas positions led by the Israeli Air Force. This came more than a week after the ceasefire began and the IDF withdrew from roughly half of the Gaza Strip territory. Despite assurances that they would not, however, despite the Hamas violation, the IDF returned to a ceasefire mode after striking several targets in Khan Yunis and also in Rafah, and as of Monday morning, there were no more exchanges of fire going on. This is partially the result of a heavy pressure from United States Special Envoy Steve Witkoff and also Jared Kushner, who demanded that Israel make its point and then stand down. In related news, the IDF combat engineers demolished a tunnel over the weekend that had previously held Israeli hostages, and the IDF spokesperson had an unusual message to the Gaza residents. And meanwhile, the water infrastructure in Gaza is on the verge of collapse, and under American pressure, Israel's threat to slow aid shipments has been reversed. Hamas is also playing games with the continued release of remains of hostages who are murdered in captivity, saying that they will release one today if field conditions will allow it. However, United States President Donald Trump is not playing games and has pledged that if required, we will dismantle Hamas ourselves. And furthermore, after the Hamas massacre of Gaza residents, Palestinians, the message from the United States is that if this continues, America will be forced to act. In the northern arena, there is also a growing threat from Hezbollah's attempts to rebuild its terror infrastructure and a surprising connection between Hezbollah and the ban on Israeli fans at the soccer match in England, which has come to light. Finally, a tanker allegedly belonging to Iran's Ghost Fleet was attacked near Yemen recently. Was it the Houthis, or was it one of the other groups that are attacking ships on the high seas off the coast of Yemen these days? We'll take a closer look. Welcome to Boots on the Ground. I'm your host Yair Pinto, bringing you all the truth from Israel. More than a week after the ceasefire and the IDF's withdrawal from roughly half of the Gaza Strip's territory on the ground, there was renewed fighting overnight on Sunday between Hamas and Israel. In the southern city of Rafah, where IDF forces are still deployed in defensive positions, Hamas terrorists emerged from a tunnel and fired RPG missiles at IDF engineering vehicles. There were 2 fatalities and 3 wounded amongst the IDF troops, and Hamas tried to say it wasn't them, and the IDF acted with restraint, waiting several hours to hit only specific Hamas targets in Rafah and in Khan Yunis inside the Gaza Strip before returning to a full ceasefire mode. Some of the Israeli strikes hit the central camps in Gaza, which Israel was careful to avoid hitting during the war because there were hostages being held in that location. Palestinian sources also reported that Israeli naval ships fired on Hamas targets in the Gaza Strip. However, on Sunday morning, the IDF announced that it has completed the wave of strikes in the Gaza Strip and that from now on it is committed to the ceasefire agreement with full enforcement to the fullest extent. President Trump's envoy Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner will arrive in Israel this week for consultations, and on Sunday morning, they called Israel's retaliatory strike a measured response and added that they believe Hamas is acting in good faith to look for the remains of the hostages who were murdered in captivity. However, Hamas has also made it very clear that there are parts of the plan it is not going to cooperate with. And I'm talking about parts where it is supposed to disarm and also disband. They are saying very clearly that they are here to stay, and this flare-up over the weekend is just proof of that. However, Israel also has plans and will bring you a glimpse into what the future holds for Hamas if they continue to refuse to disarm. Hamas still has one card to play in all of this, however, and that's the return of the remains of those hostages who were murdered in captivity by Hamas. On Monday, they said that they announced that they had located only one more set of remains over the last 24 hours and added that any escalation will interfere with the searches. Israeli Defense Minister Israel Katz responded by declaring that if the message is not understood, the responses will intensify. All of this drives home the point that as long as Hamas tunnels in Gaza are not destroyed, the government and the IDF will not be able to tell the citizens of the State of Israel that the threat to them has been removed. And with that in mind, the IDF spokesperson sent a warning to Gaza residents over the weekend to stay west of the yellow line because the IDF will respond with great force to any Hamas violations to the ceasefire. And in related news, President Trump was interviewed over the weekend and provided a series of statements regarding dismantling Hamas of its weapons and even the chances of a dramatic expansion of the Abraham Accords. The United States State Department also spoke over the weekend saying that it had credible reports that Hamas was planning to violate the ceasefire by attacking Palestinian civilians and that if Hamas continues to attack Palestinians, steps will be taken to protect them. Amidst the developments in Gaza, there is still plenty of action in Israel's northern border region with Lebanon or Syria. A year after the pager operation, Hezbollah is trying to recover far from the public's eye. According to an investigation in the French newspaper La Figaro, the Shiite terrorist organization now operates underground, rebuilding the chain of command, recruiting young leadership, and receiving direct aid from Iran. And they're also continuing to attack Israel in unconventional ways. It has now emerged that the man who made the complaint to police in the West Midlands in the United Kingdom, which resulted in fans of Israel's Maccabi Tel Aviv soccer club not being allowed to attend a match against Aston Villa, was a member of Hezbollah who immigrated to the United Kingdom. And finally, there are several questions hanging over an explosion and a fire abroad a gas tanker in the Gulf of Aden near the coast of Yemen last week. The ship is alleged to be part of Iran's Ghost Fleet, and the Houthis are denying that they hit this ship, while some reports also indicate that it might have been an accident. In any case, the crew have abandoned the stricken vessel, and authorities are warning that it could explode at any moment, leading to an ecological disaster. I'm Yair Pinto, and this is your Boots on the Ground report about what's happening in Israel. Although there is a ceasefire in Gaza, the undeniable fact is that we're still at war with Hamas, with Hezbollah, with the Houthis in Yemen, with the Shia militias in Iraq, and all the other armed groups in this region who are acting under the orders of Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guards Corps, which is the head of the crumbling axis of evil in the Middle East. A moment before we start, remember that Israel is under a media attack of fake news and anti-Semitic propaganda. We at Boots on the Ground fight this day by day with the truth. Therefore, this is very important that you help us share these videos so that we can reach as many people as possible. You can also leave a like, leave a comment, and most importantly, do not forget to click that subscribe button if you haven't already, so that you remain tuned to what's happening in Israel, Boots on the Ground style. Now, we start today's report with a look at the Hamas attack on IDF forces in Rafah, which included 3 squads emerging from tunnels and firing at IDF engineering vehicles with RPGs and rifles. This blatant violation of the ceasefire took place in the Jania neighborhood of Rafah, not far from the Tancher route on the eastern side of the Yellow Line. The attack resulted in 2 fatalities and 3 wounded amongst the IDF troops that are stationed at the post, who also returned fire and inflicted casualties on the attackers. There were actually 3 separate firefights going on simultaneously in the same time in Rafah, and as previously mentioned, this led to a series of Israeli air and sea launch strikes on Hamas positions in Rafah and also in Khan Yunis, inside the Gaza Strip. Details of the attack were released by the IDF spokesperson's office on Sunday afternoon. And according to this announcement, Forces under the command of the 932nd Battalion Combat Team of the Nacha Brigade conducted a patrol and subterranean treatment in the Tancha route area. The two events occurred at 10:32 a.m., when in the first event, terrorists came out of tunnels as a combat engineering force was digging to locate the ground course of the tunnels at that site, while at the same time the IDF pumped quantities of sea-line concrete into a different tunnel. As they were carrying out these operations, terrorist squads emerged from one of the shafts and fired an RPG anti-tank round at an excavator. At the same time, another squad fired sniper fire at another excavator working alongside it. And a third Hamas squad attacked part of the Nachal security force with sniper fire. Immediately after the attack, the IDF carried out heavy fire towards the sources of the attack, and in parallel, Air Force fighter jets conducted strikes in that area. At the first stage, the IDF refrained from striking targets from the Air Force's target bank against Hamas and only conducted a pinpoint strike in response. This followed another significant violation of the ceasefire from the last week, which included two incidents in which armed terrorists emerged from tunnels towards IDF forces in Khan Yunis and also in Rafah. Several of these terrorists were eliminated, and the IDF spokesperson's unit said that in Khan Yunis, a number of terrorists who came out of a shaft in the city area in the south of the Gaza Strip were identified. They approached the forces in a way that constituted an immediate threat to them. The terrorists were attacked from the air to remove the threat, in accordance with this agreement. So this is already the third incident since the ceasefire by the Hamas terrorist organization was violated, with an identical attack technique in areas under the IDF's control. Make sure you notice this. It is important to point out that the IDF forces in the buffer areas are subject to heavy restrictions in the rules of engagement. Fire is permitted only to drive away suspects near them, or precision fire on condition that an armed terrorist approached the defensive position of the IDF and posted a threat to the forces. In any other scenario, such as detecting armed Hamas members at a distance by eye with binoculars or by a drone, IDF forces are prohibited from firing at them. This is despite the fact that 7,000 Hamas operatives have already redeployed across the Gaza Strip to reimpose authority over the local population that returned to its neighborhoods in the cities and in the towns after the IDF's withdrawal. In any case, following Sunday's attack, which was the third serious violation of the agreement since the ceasefire went into effect, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu conveyed the situation assessment with the IDF's top brass to consider response measures against Hamas, and his office said that following the ceasefire violation by Hamas, immediately after the attack, Netanyahu instructed to act with force against terror targets in the Gaza Strip. Following this directive, the Air Force struck dozens of terror targets in the Gaza Strip, launching over 120 munitions to strike a wide underground route of the Hamas terrorist organization, more than 6 kilometers long. In that route, as noted, hostages were previously held by Hamas, amongst them 7 of the hostages out of the 20 who were released just last week. So throughout the day's strikes, fighter jets and remotely piloted aircrafts of the Air Force participated, and the Navy also opened fire towards the coast. In several strikes during the day, the aircraft identified the terrorists in real time and attacked to remove the threats. In the south of the Gaza Strip, more than 15 terror targets were struck, including tunnel shafts, military buildings, and Hamas terrorist squads. In the center of the Gaza Strip, a Hamas terror cell and field-level commanders were struck. In the northern parts of the Gaza Strip, armed terrorists who were moving towards IDF forces and crossed the yellow line were also struck. Later, heavy bombings with dozens of munitions were also reported in Khan Yunis, and in additional steps, the political echelon ordered a halt to the entry of humanitarian aid into the Gaza Strip until further notice, but canceled this following an American demand. Incidentally, Unlike other cities in the Gaza Strip that were destroyed in this war, most of the buildings in the central camps remained standing. Throughout the war, there were also no ground maneuvers in the central camps in Gaza, but now, after the release of all the living hostages, this immunity has in fact been removed. According to the Palestinians, bombings in the center of the Strip occurred, amongst other places, in the El Maghazi, El Zawaida, Nusirat, and also El Burij. Earlier on Sunday, the IDF spokesperson posted an announcement saying following the repeated violations of the ceasefire agreement and the attack carried out this morning by Hamas terror elements, the IDF will respond with great force against the terrorist infrastructure and against Hamas. Residents were urged to stay west of the yellow line to avoid being hit by the crossfire between the IDF and Hamas. It's important for you to understand that since the agreement was signed in the Gaza Strip, Hamas has been trying to challenge and test the IDF. It sends children and teenagers to the yellow line to see if the IDF will respond. It also sends armed terrorists to probe infiltration routes and the alertness of our forces. In the IDF, they understand that they are the ones who will set the future rules of the game, and whether we'll go to rounds of Hamas guerrilla attacks against the IDF troops or we go to deterrence in which Hamas understands that the IDF is not here to play games. The IDF is determined to change the security reality and not condemn itself to endless rounds of low-level, tit-for-tat confrontations with Hamas. It is also important to understand that behind the scenes there is a great deal of pressure coming on both Hamas and Israel from the Americans, who have a lot going on right now and very much want this conflict to end so that they can focus their attention somewhere else. That explains why Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu promised that 8 shipments would resume quickly despite the initial threat that they would be slowed down in response to the Hamas violations of the ceasefire agreement. It also explains why the White House envoy Steve Witkoff and also Jared Kushner will arrive in the region on Monday, and on Tuesday, Vice President J.D. Vance will arrive in Israel. The Americans are heavily invested in the ceasefire and don't want to break down, so they are exerting heavy pressure on Israel not to return to fighting. They are also putting heavy pressure on Hamas through the mediators to encourage them to move quickly on returning the remains of the hostages who were murdered in captivity. However, there are other parts of the ceasefire that Hamas is simply not interested in honoring, such as the parts where they disarm and disband. Hamas is making it very clear that they have no intention of disappearing. They are here to stay, and although its official announcements they say that they emphasize their commitment to this agreement, they are at the same time ignoring those parts of it that they don't like so much. At most, they hint that they are willing to go for a hudna, which is a temporary ceasefire of 3 to 5 years, which would be used to rehabilitate the capabilities of the Gaza Strip. So if you pay close attention, you can also identify this intention in the statements by official Egyptian figures. So to us Israelis, it's great to hear the statements from the United States President Donald Trump about the commitment to dismantle Hamas. They are important in setting the bar of expectations for the states mediating with this terrorist organization and in building the legitimacy for Israel's moves. However, on the ground, it is apparent that Hamas is recovering quickly from the blow that it received, returning to control on the streets with the help of its armed operatives, executing the Palestinian opponents, and maintaining efficient command and control mechanisms. It is also important to remember that within President Donald Trump's 20-point plan, the second stage, which has still not been agreed to by Israel and Hamas, is supposed to include further IDF withdrawals beyond the yellow line. According to the plan, the IDF is to gradually transfer areas to the control of a future international force that will be established and will be responsible for demilitarizing the Gaza Strip. In recent days, there have been reports of international contacts around the establishment of this force, including an attempt to advance it through a United Nations Security Council resolution. And according to reports, the mediators are also discussing sending an initial force of about 1,000 Palestinian Authority police trained in Egypt and also in Jordan, intended to help enforce the security inside the Gaza Strip, where in recent days, fighting has raged between Hamas and other Palestinian clans, and even massacres of opponents of the terrorist organization Hamas. Israel is not supportive of this plan to reintroduce the Palestinian Authority into the Gaza Strip at this time, but that could change in the coming weeks or months. In any case, at the moment, every single Palestinian Authority police officer is needed in the Palestinian Authority administrated cities of Judea and Samaria, as armed gangs are supported by Iran and continue to challenge them for the control of the streets in Judea and Samaria. And here, at TBN Israel, we will continue to report about all the truth of what's happening in the Gaza Strip. So keep sharing the truth, share, leave a comment, and make sure to subscribe to TBN Israel YouTube channel. And now, I want to thank you and to talk about another front in this war, which you don't hear about most of the time. And that's the battle that millions of ordinary Israelis are fighting just to put some food on the table and pay the bills every month. Over the past 2 years, thousands of Israelis put their normal lives on hold to serve in the reserves, in the IDF, defending us, leaving behind their families, their jobs, their small businesses, their farms, their workshops, their bakeries, and studios that they had built from the ground up. Now, many of them are being demobilized and coming home, and while their service in the IDF reserves may be over for now, the road to recovery is just beginning. Getting back to business after weeks or months away is very hard to start over. Orders were lost, income stopped. In some cases, entire operations need to be restarted from the ground up. And that's where Arza is helping. So Arza works with small businesses and artisans across Israel, many of whom are just now returning to work after their reserve duty in the IDF. When someone subscribes to Arza, they're not just getting beautiful handcrafted items from the Holy Land, they're providing real, immediate support to people that are rebuilding their lives. Each box brings in income. Each order helps someone to restart in Israel. So to be part of this support, go to www.arzabox.com/TBNIL. Again, that's www.arzabox.com/TBNIL, and please use the code TBNIL for an extra 10% off your subscription. So helping Israelis restart their lives after 2 years of being in the IDF starts here. Now, we're getting back into the news, but before we move on to the IDF's fighting on Israel's northern border, I want to quickly review the diplomatic developments for the second stage of the agreement of ceasefire between Israel and Hamas in Gaza. Israeli officials announced on Sunday evening that they decided to halt the entry of humanitarian aid into the Gaza Strip after the incidents in Rafah. However, an hour after the announcement, which said that the halt of aid would be until further notice, a political source clarified that the movement of trucks will resume upon completion of the bombings in Gaza. Behind the scenes, there was an American pressure, and Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu promised that the aid would resume tomorrow. This is despite the initial promise. The humanitarian framework in the agreement between Israel and Hamas includes the entry of 600 aid trucks per day carrying food, medical equipment, fuel to operate essential systems, and also cooking gas. Around the world, the latest developments are described as the first major challenge to the ceasefire mediated by United States President Donald Trump. In Hamas, which denied connection to the incidents in Rafah, they announced this evening that a delegation headed by the terrorist organization's senior Khalil al-Khaya arrived in Cairo to follow up on the implementation of the ceasefire agreement with the mediators and the Palestinian factions. On Israel's side, following the incidents in Rafah, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu conveyed a situation assessment with the IDF's top brass to consider response measures against Hamas. From the Prime Minister's office, it was stated that following the ceasefire violation by Hamas, Netanyahu instructed to act with force against terror targets in the Gaza Strip. Defense Minister Israel Katz also promised a powerful response, but in his statement, he also signaled that Israel does not intend to cause the agreement to collapse and emphasized that the responses will intensify if the message is not understood. After he applied pressure to renew the ceasefire in the Gaza Strip, United States President Donald Trump said overnight between Sunday and Monday that it is possible those who violate the agreement and fired in the southern parts of the Gaza Strip are rebels within Hamas. He added in remarks to reporters abroad when he was on Air Force One that it will be handled properly with a heavy hand. The president also said that the ceasefire agreement is still in effect after it passed its first major test, but also that we'll have to see what happens. We want to make sure it will be very quiet with Hamas, and as you know, they are pretty wild. If we pay close attention to all of these statements, it becomes obvious that behind the scenes there was American pressure, and Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu promised that aid would resume quickly despite the initial promise. The Americans were involved in contacts with the mediators and with Israel in order to save the ceasefire from collapsing. This also comes against the background of Hamas's announcements, which denied connection to the incidents in Rafah and claimed, at the non-coincidental timing, that it located the remains of another fallen hostage and would only be able to deliver him if the conditions on the ground will allow it. The president's envoy Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner spoke by phone with Minister of Strategic Affairs Ron Dermer on Sunday evening and urged him that Israel will not break the tools and suffice with a measured response focused on Hamas. A senior security source said that before the aid fiasco, that the Israeli response was not intended to bring down the agreement and that the United States was updated in advance on the strikes, adding that a ceasefire does not need saving. This is not a response that dismantles the agreement. This is not blowing up the agreement. It's cause and effect. There is a violation and there is a punishment. In addition, the United States Department announced early Sunday morning that it informed the states guaranteeing this implementation of the ceasefire agreement in the Gaza Strip of reliable reports that Hamas would violate the agreement and attack Palestinian civilians. The announcement added that if Hamas continues this assault, steps will be taken in order to protect Gaza residents and preserve the integrity of the ceasefire. For its part, Hamas issued an official statement in which it denied reports of an impending attack or of violating the ceasefire. Only last Thursday, United States President Donald Trump continued to warn that if Hamas continues killing people in Gaza, which was not the agreement, we will have no choice but to go in and kill them. The president was later asked about this statement and he replied, "We have commitment from Hamas. Hopefully, they will stand by their commitment. We have the hostages back. We are lucky. It's a difficult situation. They returned bodies. If they behave well, then good. If not, then we'll deal with them." He also clarified that the United States military will not be the one to enter Gaza. American forces will not enter, but someone will under United States auspices. Remember that on Monday last week, Hamas executed 8 people in Gaza on claims that they collaborated with Israel, and the execution was filmed and distributed. The next day, Trump referred to the actions of the terrorist organization and claimed that he doesn't really care about that, after earlier hinting that he gave permission to the organization to run internal security in Gaza. When asked what will happen if the terrorist organization refuses to disarm, he replied, "I'm thinking about it. Israel will return to those streets the moment I give the signal. If Israel could go in and eliminate them, Hamas, they would do it." But already on Tuesday, the matter got out of control and the terrorist organization executed dozens of hundreds of Gazan residents suspected of treason, propaganda against Hamas, or various other things that Hamas doesn't like. So to all of the pro-Hamas demonstrators around the world, I hope that you are paying attention and beginning to understand what it is that you are supporting for the past 2 years. And here at TBN Israel, we will continue to report on every development on this subject, so keep spreading the truth, share, and follow us. Most importantly, do not forget to click on the subscribe button so that you remain tuned to what's happening in Israel, boots on the ground style. Now, we're switching our focus to events in the northern arena. Yair, after the resounding humiliation of Operation Beepers, the elimination of Hassan Nasrallah, and the heavy defeat that he suffered at the hands of Israel, Hezbollah is trying to rebuild its strength. An investigative report published in the French newspaper Le Figaro over the weekend reveals that the Shiite terrorist organization is now operating almost completely underground to rebuild its command structure and its military force. This is with direct assistance from Iran. In a rare testimony cited in the piece, the Hezbollah operative named Wafik described this chaos that prevailed in the organization after Nasrallah's elimination in Beirut in September 2024, saying for 10 days everyone was lost. We were like a body sunk in a coma, he said. According to him, during that dramatic period, no one knew who was running the options, and only the operatives in southern Lebanon continued to fight in accordance with the emergency plans that were prepared in advance for the disappearance of the leadership. 2 weeks later, according to the report, Iranian representatives led by the Quds Force commander Ismail Qani arrived in Lebanon to restore the chain of command. Wafik says that they rebuilt the army within 10 days, but the political echelon remained empty. And after that, Hezbollah began establishing a new organizational structure. The organization's MP Ali Fayyad declared, "We have a new secret military structure with a younger and more dynamic leadership." According to the report, Hezbollah has returned to clandestine methods reminiscent of the 1980s, including shortened command change, separating the military and the political wings, and reducing the circle of decision makers. However, in southern Lebanon, Hezbollah yielded to government pressure and agreed to dismantle about 80% of its weapons depots, but at the same time it maintained infrastructure and munitions in the north of this country, Lebanon, and also in the Bekaa Valley. Iran, according to the report, has reasserted tight control over the terrorist organization, but instructed it to move to a defensive posture and not seek a direct confrontation with Israel at this time. However, according to the report, Hezbollah is very busy attempting to rebuild its capabilities to try and prepare for the future confrontation with Israel when circumstances are more favorable for them. And here, at TBN Israel, we will continue to bring you all the truth about what's happening on our northern border. So keep spreading the truth, share, follow us, leave a comment. Make sure to hit the like and hit the subscribe button. Now, let's talk about the events that took place in England that is connected to Israel through one of our most popular sports here, which is soccer. West Midlands Police in the United Kingdom sparked a public storm last week when it asked Maccabi Tel Aviv fans to refrain from attending the Europa League match against Aston Villa in Birmingham, citing public safety concerns. And now emerges, according to the Sunday Mail report, that a former Hezbollah activist, Dayab Abu Jahah, is behind this doizer that activists, and they claim that they laid the groundwork for the police's controversial decision. The Hind Rajab Foundation, headed by Abu Jahah, assisted the Game Over Israel. This is a campaign in compiling an anti-Israel information file that was submitted to West Midlands Police before the match at Villa Park. According to the campaign group, the document was critical to the decision to bar Maccabi Tel Aviv fans from attending this game. The doizer referred to the systematic exploitation of football culture for genocide and why Israel's place in world sport is indefensible, as stated by these authors. It also highlighted the riots in Amsterdam when Maccabi played Ajax last year, stating that the arrival of Maccabi fans to Aston is a diverse and mostly Muslim country, poses a real risk to community tensions and to public order breaches. Now, let me tell you about the primary author of this report. Abu Jahah, born in Lebanon, was previously part of the Hezbollah terrorist organization, and he has boasted about his military training. An investigation uncovered photos of him brandishing a Kalashnikov, a AK-47 assault rifle, and in July, he shared such a photo with his followers online, writing that to be called a terrorist is a badge of honor. After Hamas's barbaric attack on October 7th, Abu Jahah praised the massacre on social media and claimed it is not anti-Semitic to say, "damn Jews." He also compared Jews to Nazis and staged mock funerals in Belgium, where he resides, for Hamas leaders while lauding Hezbollah leaders and praising them. Abu Jahah also founded the non-defunct Arab European League, which was fined in Belgium in 2010 for publishing Holocaust denial content on their website. In 2009, he was banned from entering the United Kingdom because of his views on the Middle East. Sounds like just a sort of person that British police should rely on to tell them what policies they should be enforcing or not. What do you think? However, the police decision to bar Israeli fans from the game sparked sharp reactions in Britain and also in Israel. Prime Minister Keir Starmer and Home Secretary Shabana Mahmoud both called to overturn this decision, while Chris Philip, the Shadow Home Secretary, expressed grave concerns that West Midlands police had taken advice from a terror fan. He called Abu Jahah dangerous and his involvement a disgrace. Further discussions on the matter are expected this week. Here in Israel, we are watching with great concern and also sadness as the United Kingdom continues to move towards a future in which jihadist terror will have a commanding voice in public policy and culture. It's not too late to stop this trend, but we are very late in this game. Now, I want to conclude today's report by paying respects to some heroes who fell in the battle defending the State of Israel just recently. Itai Yabetz, 21 years of age, from Modi'in Maccabim Reut, was a soldier in the Erez program in Battalion 932 of the Nachal Brigade. Major Yaniv Kola, 26 years of age, was a company commander in Battalion 932 of the Nachal Brigade. He is survived by his wife, Neta, his parents, Dagnit, and Oren, his daughter, Idan, and his sister, Yuval. And here at TBN Israel, we will continue to report every day, so stand with us in sharing the truth. Make sure to leave a like, share this video with someone who wants to know what's happening in Israel. The most important thing that you can do is to keep praying for the peace of Jerusalem, pray for the hostages that are getting used to normal life with their loved ones in Israel, that they'll have a speedy recovery physically and mentally. Pray for the IDF soldiers that are risking their lives against terrorist groups in Gaza and in other places around the world. Make sure to pray for wisdom to our leaders, to your leaders in this very difficult situation, and keep praying for the peace of Jerusalem.
Hello, this is Mati here in Jerusalem with TBN Israel.
This is Yair Pinto from TBN Israel here in Jerusalem. TBN Israel is keeping viewers informed with Israel-focused news, culture, and what God is doing in this land.
Support TBN Israel today online at tbn.org/Israel. Thank you.